Well, welcome everybody. Today we have Alex Adkisson. Thanks for being on with us. I know you said it's your first day back
Yeah,
in school post holidays and all that, so you've got a full slate. Thanks for making some time
yeah, of
before
course.
your class day kicks off. But jumping right into it, can we start with you giving us just a little bit of background about your sort of teaching experience, career? And I know for you, that's kind of extra specific because you were a student, I think, in one of the early geometry and construction programs, and that kind of influenced your career trajectory even. So yeah, maybe
Yeah,
talk a little bit about that with us.
yeah, definitely. So how I kind of became a part of the program was being a student very first off. So that very first year, back in like 2006, I was a sophomore in high school and had actually failed Algebra 1 twice. Um, and somehow got promoted into geometry. But that was the very first year that Tom and Scott were trying to roll out geometry and construction for the very, very first time. And I got to be in that classroom that very first year. And it definitely changed my trajectory massively. Um, you know, I had grown up, my dad is an electrician, and I had worked with him and I had understand how to use my hands. And school had never really applied anything for me before. And so the program was a massive cornerstone in my educational and professional career, where I then changed and could see myself maybe coming and teaching students like me. And it just was a really big part of me seeing how construction applied to math. And I wasn't a dumb math student, that I actually did know math. I just needed to see it, or now that I think about it, I just needed the confidence to be successful in school. And so that's how the program started. And so, or that's how my journey started with the program itself. And so after taking that my sophomore year, um, I then the next year took Algebra 2 and Trig combined and finished calculus by my senior year, and later enrolled at Colorado State University as a civil engineering student, but in hopes to become a CTE teacher. And then graduated from Colorado State and started teaching that very first year, back at my old high school at Loveland High, where we started all of this. And so, yeah, it's a very significant part of my life, and it changed my life a whole lot, and firmly believe in the things that we do.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's such a cool. I love your story. It's such a great example of the kind of the knock-on long-term effects of even what might seem like, small changes. And as I've been doing these interviews, I so consistently hear from people how students say, this class is the reason I enjoy school, or this is, this changed my perspective on stuff. And, you see that in that window, and that's great. But then to kind of hear from you how much of a difference that can make in terms of your sense of identity and trajectory and all those other things is really, really cool.
Yeah, definitely. That longitudinal side, I get to share that piece, which is kind of cool.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so then I'd be curious to hear then for you so you went, obviously you went through your undergraduate and got your degree and got your teaching certification, all that other kind of stuff. And then did you drive straight into teaching a GIC or AMPed
Yeah,
curriculum like right off the bat?
Yeah, so my very first year teaching, I came back, and so my whole goal was to come back and teach geometry and construction, but I was the CTE side, and Scott was already the CTE teacher in geometry and construction there. And so my very first year of teaching, both Scott and my principal at the time in the math department, they all said, you can have the best geometry class in the whole world, but it doesn't matter if we can't get them through the most failed class in all of high school, Algebra 1. And so my first year teaching, I was charged with writing the Amped on Algebra program, which Tom Moore helped. And I
Hmm.
had a couple co-teachers, and they helped a lot along the way. But that was my first year teaching, was doing the bulk share of Amped on Algebra and writing it that very first year, into the program that it's formed and transitioned to today. And so, yeah, my very first year teaching, I had two sections of Amped on Algebra, and then I got one section of geometry and construction. And then Scott's schedule was the inverse of that in essence. And so that's kind of how we did it. And we were cross training, and it was good to get as many eyes on amped at the time, and then get me exposure as a teacher in geometry and construction. And
Yeah.
yeah, and so that's kind of how my very first year went. So that very first year, just flying by the seat of our pants, trying to figure out what to do with amped on algebra and how to run a business with students, and tie it to the math curriculum. And yeah, it was a crazy time.
Yeah. A lot of spinning plates all at once, I'm sure. Um, so and then as a CTE teacher, I'd be curious to kind of hear your perspective. I know, from the math side, it's great to see kids sort of coming to appreciate math or feel more comfortable or confident with it, have a better experience of it. But kind of administratively, math is sort of always going to be part of the curriculum no matter what. But
Yeah,
CTE broadly as a field tends to be a little bit more variable, how
yeah.
much time, energy, resources, support that it's able to get. Have you experienced like the combination of these two disciplines has that helped? Or what's your perspective on kind of the impact of these programs from the CTE side? Because it's kind of ironic because it's easier in a lot of ways to get kids excited about the program, but it's a little bit harder to like advocate for space for those programs in a lot of schools. So yeah, I'd be curious to hear your take on that.
Yeah, no, that's you're kind of leading right into it, but it does, we really are able to leverage the two, in a way that is super impactful. One for the math, and I think a lot of people can see that surface level, like you're saying. You know, Tom and Scott and I always say the broccoli and the cheese. The CTE is the cheese that we put on the broccoli to get the kids to eat it, right? But on the flip side of that, the rigor and the routine and the things that math has to offer to CTE is pretty big. That on like the student side of it, right? We have some more structures, and we have, that more direct instruction that can kind of happen, and those routines and things like that were very helpful for me as a CTE teacher. Because I mean, those who have met me, they know I kind of fly by the seat of my pants, but having some of that structure and some of that really helped me, one, as a young educator, but two, it really helped me kind of understand and see, like, like you said, CTE is kind of a volatile program to run. If you don't have registrations, you don't have a job. Like, if you don't have kids and butts and seats, you don't have a place to teach. And so we run with high numbers, but we also have a steady enrollment every single year. And that doesn't mean that we don't recruit. That doesn't mean that we don't have to still fight for those numbers. But especially once you're an established program and people know what you do, it really does help in terms of you having that steady amount of students coming into your classroom. And it's just got that piece that parents really love, the applied math, and parents really like that, which helps you get over some of the, sometimes you might have, and we still deal with it, some of the stigmatisms around the construction career pathway.
Mm.
And but it kind of, it helps us kind of over bounds, or not overbound, but helps us kind of over take those preconceptions of some parents who are like, my kids aren't going to go into construction. And so that's really helpful, because it's more of the contextualized approach. We get to, math wasn't involved, and the world revolves around what we came up with. We use math to represent the things in the real world, right? And so parents can really buy into that. So that helps on the CT side, or the administration side of that,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. And then that kind of, to me, sort of segues a little bit into another question I wanted to ask you about with some of the, well, it's a sort of two pieces. We'll start with the first aspect on the student side. Um, Obviously, we were talking about sort of the combined curriculums and like interdisciplinary focus of the program. But another thing that I've noticed a lot is how much emphasis is placed on communication skills and preparedness and interaction dynamics, some sort of like 21st century skill sets. And you even
Mhm.
kind of referenced this a little bit for yourself, of one of the big outcomes for you as a student just being a higher level of confidence, or a place to sort of like connect into your academics and so on. So can you talk just a little bit about the programs and your observations of how it has engaged students, or what it does for students, even outside of just the core curriculum. But a lot of the emphasis, even in some of the trainings that I've observed, has really been placed around helping teachers think about how to create classroom culture and, the cooperative grouping focus, and the fact that you've got to figure out how to get like 40 kids out to a build site or on a workshop floor, and it's not just everyone, head down at a desk. And that opens up those interesting, dynamics that are a little bit different, but leads
Yeah.
to some different outcomes. So yeah, I'd love to hear your take on some of that.
Yeah, I gotta be honest, it's probably the most important part. Besides having a real life project like building a real structure or running a real business with students, that cooperative grouping, team building, culture and climate that you're alluding to is honestly it's kind of the lifeblood of it. And I can go back to as a student, it was, you kind of feel like a family in school when you're a younger kid. You're in that same classroom with the same kids and the same teacher the whole day, every day, right? And as soon as you get into middle school and high school, those are smaller sections and it's a lot more, less intimate setting, right? For lack of a better term. And in our programs, we combat that drastically. The very beginning of the school year, students say, I love that class because all we do is play games, but we're doing cooperative grouping and team building. And we say it over and over. We go so slow to go fast. And it is imperative that the students understand that we are a real business. We are building real structures for real people with real customers. And if you can't get over qualms, if you can't go through, the stages of group dynamics to be able to work with people who you don't necessarily agree with or get along with, we will not be successful as a whole. And so we stress that from day one. And I think the number one thing that kids always say when they leave AMPed or geometry and construction or any one of those things is that, they miss the family, no matter what, it's whether we get along or not, they kind of miss that piece. And we have a little bit longer with them because we double them up back to back and we have them
Mm-hmm.
and we do all the things. And my massive motto, and every student knows this, is to know and be known. And so I share with students what's going on, and students a lot of times share with me what's going on. And we are building that culture and climate in order for us to have the trust to go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to send 40 to 50 of you out here on our build site. You all are going to have hammers. We're going to start swinging them. And I'm not going to be able to watch every single one of you every single time. You see my right hand, it wasn't built to hold yours the whole time. I have to be able to trust you. And so that is what we're doing at the beginning of the year. And then we're continually, going through it, and it's hard to stick with it. Like I'm planned for today. I was like, you know what, got away from the team building and cooperative grouping, and I can tell. So guess
Mm-hmm.
what? I'm at the beginning of day one, semester two, and we're going to go back to culture and climate and start to rebuild those things and reestablish them and tell the students why, the big deal. And I think that's the big part of it. It is school, but there's more to it. And so we can kind of get the buy-in, whether we're doing building for Habitat for Humanity and we have that philanthropic piece that we can tie into, or we're just doing a job for a normal customer. It's bigger than just the class, and getting kids to understand that really helps us get the buy-in for them to participate in a way that is respectful and meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. And I'm sure that's a huge part of what makes it such a memorable or meaningful experience for a lot of students. Um, Slight segue as well, talking about other aspects of the program that I think are interesting or distinctive. Um, the team teaching dynamic, the co-teaching dynamic between two teachers, kind of essentially teaching one class that's fusing two different disciplines or contexts. Obviously, it's pretty critical because you need to bring both of those expertises together. Can you just talk a little bit about your experience of that side of the program, or maybe any tips that you have about ways that you've seen that go well, or how to approach that, and what you see as being some of the outcomes or benefits of that approach to doing kind of an unusual approach to structuring your class and your schedule and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, team teaching can have a dirty connotation in education because it's not easy. A lot of times as teachers, we're used to being, our classroom's kind of our world, and a lot of teachers really enjoy that. And so bringing another person into there and understanding their non-negotiables and their things like that is really challenging at first. But I got to be honest, I think it made me, I'm just going to start out. I think it progressed my teaching tenfold in my first 3 years of teaching. If I wasn't team teaching a lot, I don't think I would be nearly as good of a teacher after those years as I was. It is sincerely the best form of, I think, professional development, because every single day you're accountable to someone else and you can debrief and what went well and what didn't. You get to see different teaching styles. You get to see different things that people bring to the table. Now, on the flip side, you have to deal with things that
Hmm.
are hard too, because maybe someone's not holding up their end of the bargain, or someone's feeling like they're doing all the work, or they're doing all the discipline, or all of that. And so, that is the hard part of it. That's the part where communication is so key. You got to be able to kind of talk. It's kind of like a parenting relationship, and you've got to be able to understand what the other person wants out of that class, and vice versa, and give and take, and be able to do that. And if you can do that successfully, I think it means massive things for the students, because my strengths and my weaknesses are completely different than my co-teacher's strengths and weaknesses most of the time. Um, and so, students are drawn to one or the other to build closer relationships. Certain teachers might not be experts in the math class, and a lot of students can relate to that. Vice versa. There's the kids who really are good at math and they can relate to them. It's just being able to leverage not just the strengths of each other, leverage the pieces that you're not very good at. Anyone who's ever seen me in a training or anywhere knows that I can't spell to save my life. I've tried so very hard. Actually, let's be honest, anyone who's seen the AMP curriculum knows that there's a lot of typos in there for me. And the thing is, being able to be vulnerable with the students and say, hey, I'm not the sage on a stage here. I have my own um, downfalls, I think, is huge too. But we can utilize and use the team teaching as an example for the students to show, hey, we can work together and we can be better as a group than we can as individuals. And so if we can do that on a team teaching level, then our students can also do it in their cooperative groups of four or whatever it is that they're doing. And so we're leading by example in a way, in terms of teamwork and cooperative grouping in our own teaching styles, as we want our students. And I get to observe a lot of classes, and it's very easy to see if two teachers don't necessarily work well together. Guess what? Their students aren't necessarily going to work very well together
Hmm.
either. And it's pretty eye-opening to kind of see that, but it doesn't take long to kind of tell. And so, working through those pieces and having them is a telltale. And and I can say that from my own experience. I've been team teaching for 10 years now. The ones where I have a good relationship, my classes are a lot smoother. And the ones where I don't have as good of a relationship, it's bumpier. And that's just the way that it is. And so trying to work through those pieces and set it up the best, not only for your own sanity as a teacher, but your students, and their how they're enjoying the class itself as well.
Yeah. Yep. It's definitely like you said, it's more work upfront to invest into the relationship and into the process, but it seems to be a lot of payoff on the
No
other
slow
end
to
if
go
you
fast.
make that. Yeah, for sure. Another thing you mentioned that I'd like to follow up on, you mentioned a little bit the dynamic with parents or families, or even sort of like local community. In some ways, I think because of outcomes and results, but also because of the process itself being like really different, and having something that people can really get their head around that's unique or is noticeable or impressive as a project or whatever. Can you talk just a little bit about your experience of kind of engaging the local community or student families, et cetera, in and around the program? If there's any things that you've experienced from that you could share as like suggestions or ways you've gone about that, or some of the outcomes you've observed in that dynamic of the program as well.
Yeah, so I've started the program in two different communities. And when you're first starting them out, it is a little bit challenging because it's different, right? But you leverage that it's different because everybody knows the traditional math pathway, right? And so that's kind of how we sell it. Hey, you know what? We're going to take a different approach to math, and we're going to start with the why. And we're going to start with that. and we're going to run and amp the profitable business. I've got revenue, cost, profit, break even, and I've just covered a large percentage of Algebra 1. And that's how we kind of sell it. You know what? We're going to try something different, something fun. We're going to go hands on. We're going to run a real business. We've got heat presses. We're going to print shirts, or we're going to, utilize a wood shop, and we're going to build products, or 3D printers, and we're going to do this. And whatever it is that you're going to try and do the hands on part, you want to kind of bolster and kind of say, hey, this is what we're going to do to run a profitable business, to tie it back to our math, to show students why math is important and what it is that we're doing to utilize it to make sure that we're profitable, and we have a good production rates and defect rates and all of those things, right? Or on the geometry and construction side, this is what we're going to be building, and this is how we're going to apply the math that we're doing. And or maybe you're working with a nonprofit, that's a huge sell. We're building houses for families in need with habitat, or whatever that might be. And so that's what you're doing up front, right? And when you're starting, and that's hard, but you're going to go out and you go out and you sell that, and you get numbers, and then you talk to admin and you say, hey, I need help. Help me get the numbers in here and give me this year. And then after that, once your students have gone through it and you've had parents go through it and they can see the difference, and you do the things that you do, then the program starts to have its own lifeblood. And your biggest then sell is your students. And that's almost any program in a school. Let's be honest. As soon as an 8th grade parent is going to come in, they're going to say, "Oh, so and so took that class last year. Let's go ask their parents what they thought about it." And that is the big thing, is kind of utilizing, getting them in the door the first off, and then having that experience, and then having the building or the program kind of build on itself, and have the people that kind of go through that. You could have no better sales folks for you than your own students. And and I think that's how we've built such successful programs, is pouring into those students and having those students then pour into others. And not only in a recruitment way, but in their education, and kind of mentorship, and bringing them through, and just kind of having the scaffolding of different students, and whether you have them as TAs, or what we used to call our project design team. Some aren't going to know that. Or for me now, it's my construction management students, which are the classes that they take with me after geometry and construction and amped. Utilizing those students as leaders, and helping build and bolster your program.
Yeah. Yeah, that is great. A lot of good advice in there as well, especially for anybody who's in those early phases when you got to get a little, water under the bridge, and some success stories to point to, which will actually lead me to my last question, because I know you got to wrap up and start getting ready for class. But I'd love to hear if you have any just favorite student stories or memories from your classes over the year. And you could probably go on for longer than we have, but if you have one or two to share, I would love to hear them.
Yeah, I'll just go out my most recent one. So we're, as CTE teachers, we're held to our advisory boards, right? And so I was doing our construction trades advisory board the other day, and was reaching out, and it was really cool. I'll just specifically point one out. Haley Hansen. So Haley Hansen was a student at Loveland High. And my very first year's teaching, as a first year teacher, sometimes you're like, I'm doing worse for the kids than anything good, and but she was a cohort of that very first amped crew for the most part, and then went into geometry and construction, and then stayed on with us until she graduated. And when she graduated, she decided to go get her engineering degree at CU Boulder. And then she sent an email to Scott and I, because we were both her teachers throughout the years, 2 years ago, a super long novel of just the impact of the programs on her, and she was starting her career and all of that stuff. Well, it just was really cool to kind of hear back from her, and she wants to come and contribute. So now she's been a part of the advisory board for the last 2 years. She's working as an engineer at Kiewit now, but she's going to transfer back up to Northern Colorado. But just like building those professional careers, where those students now are a part of my advisory board, advising me on what what I should be teaching. Is kind of a cool piece, you know, because in
Hmm.
education it's a weird thing. We teach about stuff that we don't actually do every day. I mean, we do it, but you know, we're
Yeah.
not on the cutting edge trends of construction per se or things like that. So, you know, having her, or you know, we have three former students on our advisory board currently here in Denver that we had taught at up north in Loveland. And you know, so just that is super cool. Like that's fresh in my mind. One of the first
Yeah.
stories that kind of pop into my head, but you
That's a
know,
great
yeah.
example. Yeah. That's so cool. Well, thank you so much for being on with us. I know you got to go get prep for your class to kick off.
Yeah,
So
cheers.
best of luck wrangling all the kids on post break energy.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Team
great
builders.
being on with you. Yeah, you got to get in there. Awesome. All right. Thank you very much, Alex, and thanks everyone else for watching.
All right, thanks. See ya.